This is going to be a video response to the YouTube user rageagainsttheclampdown. He made a response to my video on left libertarianism. I think I made that video about a month or two ago, and he just responded less than a week ago when he first put it out, but I've been on vacation.
Let me just say, Rage Against the Clampdown, I am actually subbed to you. I think we actually have fairly similar YouTube relations with each other, because I saw in your comments that you had heard of me but were rather disinterested, and I think that's kind of what happened with me. If I see a video that I like and I look at their other videos and I like one or two of them, I will sub to that person. And I did that to you probably something like a year ago. You know, it could have been 9 months, I'm not sure. And then we don't have all the time in the world, and if the next videos I watch aren't, so interesting, or I can't get through the whole one, I'll usually stop watching that person unless their title of a video is particularly interesting. And so, I mean, I have probably 400 subs, or I probably subscribe to 400 people around there, and probably there's only about a dozen that I will actually watch everything that they make, if that. And so I am somewhat familiar with you. I've actually seen videos of you in Ridley Report, so I know that you're in the Free State Project, and you're in New Hampshire, and so that's cool. Now, your video did not really do much to assuage my misgivings, I guess would be a good way to put it, about left libertarianism. One that I don't think I addressed in my video is just its designation as left libertarianism. In the comments below your video, which I did have the opportunity to look through on a couple occasions, there is kind of he's a right libertarian, I'm a right libertarian, and in my video I did talk about how I come across as right-wing to a lot of people, but these are people who are basically totally ignorant about, say, the non-aggression principle or libertarianism in general, or Austrian economics or anything like that. They don't really know anything, and sometimes your positions come across as right-wing because the perception is right-wing people are anti-government, or at least anti-big government, and you come and say you're against, welfare, or against minimum wage laws, or the FDA or whatever, and that just comes across as right-wing. But that's, as I think as we both know, probably not a very accurate and descriptive way to describe a right libertarian. And I kind of reject the term. I mean, it's very hard nowadays to logically defend the left-right paradigm. As far as I'm concerned, the two poles are basically more or less random assortments of policy positions that aren't coherent. The right wing wants, they don't, I hate to even say this, but rhetorically sometimes they want less government in certain areas, but they want more government in other areas, and it's the same miscellaneous basket of policy positions on the left. They want more government in certain areas and less government in certain areas. And it really, people who become serious ideologically one way or the other, not just in my area but in other areas, it starts to lose any kind of descriptive power. And so there are no, I don't know anyone who really identifies themselves as right libertarians. And I don't hear left libertarians even use the term very much. So you might say that there are socially conservative libertarians, of which there's a decent number, but that doesn't make them right-wing, I would argue. So the other problem is, the problem that I have is, why would you want to associate yourself with a random assortment of mostly bad policy positions, which is what both the left and right are. They both have terrible, and they're both, just like even the things that are rhetorically ostensibly less terrible on each of them, in practice they're not like that at all. So the Republicans are supposedly more free market and, you know, personal liberty in the economic sense, but in effect they never are. We haven't seen anything approaching more economic freedom under right-wing control, to the extent that Republican and right-wing are synonymous. I mean, maybe here and there you can find tiny little gradations to liberty, but those would always be in the context of many more abrogations of individual liberty. Likewise, on the left, supposedly they're more, you know, sexual freedom and civil liberties, but in effect, when it comes down to it, they support Leviathan over this individual all the time. And there are some, you know, there are Dennis Kucinich's, just as there are Ron Paul's and Walter Jones's, but not many. They're pretty terrible. I have no faith that a left-wing government is going to be more civil libertarian and just tax me real bad. I just don't see that as ever happening. So why you'd want to identify with, quote, the left? I understand that they have, you know, there's a long history there, and I remember a debate between somebody who's on the Alliance of the Libertarian Left, I believe, and what's the YouTube user, How the World Works, I believe. I don't know, what's his real name? His real name is something else, but YouTube user How the World Works. And he started talking about, oh, well, when Basquiat was in the Congress in the 1830s and 40s, you know, he sat on the left, and yeah, whatever. I mean, it was 160 years ago, 170 years ago. They've changed. They've polarized to different spectrums, like at least 3 or 4 times since then, and even more if you count, well, in France they've done it, and in the United States they've done it. You talked about kind of in defense of yourself and the labels. You mentioned Benjamin R. Tucker. I did know who he was. It's not the first I ever heard of him. I will admit that I've not really read any of his writings directly. I've read little quotes here and there, sometimes quite extensively, but you know, I haven't read any of his actual works. I know a bit of his biography, what he did. I know he ran a bookstore, and I know that Murray Rothbard thought pretty highly of him. But to then go off and say, well, he called himself a socialist or left-wing, and so I'm comfortable calling myself those things as well, or just generally I'm comfortable using the labels of people who used those labels 100 years ago. I'm not comfortable with that, because those labels have changed. So it may be true that someone like Emma Goldman called herself a communist, or Benjamin Tucker called himself a socialist, and so okay, and you can say, well, I kind of agree with them here and there, so I'm going to adopt those terms. But those terms in common parlance and even in the dictionary, either way, don't mean what Benjamin Tucker or Emma Goldman used them for. And so why you would want, they mean socialism. They mean government control of the means of production, or you know, government enforced collectivism or wealth redistribution. So they don't mean the things that maybe they used to, or maybe that other people use them for. So I don't see the point in really doing that. It's not a justification. I'm not going to call myself a communist because I can find somebody in history who called themselves a communist and who agreed with me on some things. You also talk about Rothbard and Karl Hess pandering. I actually don't think Karl Hess pandered. I think he really, I mean, he joined the Workers of the World and became a welder, I guess. But I think he grew out of that too. Later he said, yeah, this is not, you know, he had a very interesting intellectual journey. He got his start really in the Republicans. I mean, he pretty much figured he was for liberty, basically individual liberty, and he thought that the Republicans were going to do that. That's what Republicans were all about, and he spent like literally decades of his life working that way. and then he realized that that was bullshit, and so he, you know, approached the left, and he did that for a while too, although not as long, and then he realized that was also bullshit. And so why then we would say, well, he's endorsed the left. And the same, now Rothbard, I think, was overtly pandering, and he did it to the left and the right. He did it to the left first and then the right. He basically, on the war issues, decided the right was not going to be anti-war, the left was, and so he started to approach the left. And if you ever look somewhere, I could never find it now, but Walter Block talks about doing this with Rothbard, where they would go to meetings of like Maoists, literally Maoists and Trotskyites, and try and convince them that they needed a gold standard, you know, to hurt the capitalists or whatever. That was a huge mistake, and it was a huge mistake later when they approached the right. I mean, Rothbard and Rockwell and Hans Hermann Hoppe kind of had a not secret conspiracy to appeal to conservatives, and they I think the term they used was paleo-libertarians or paleo-conservatives, and they kind of decided to work with somebody like Pat Buchanan and kind of couch themselves in a right-wing stance, and it was a huge mistake. Now Rockwell is socially conservative, and some of Hoppe's positions are socially conservative. I don't know that he actually is, and so they may come across that way a little bit, but that's more than being socially conservative and less than being pandering any longer. And it was a huge mistake. I think you know, I wouldn't become a Republican because Rothbard approached right-wing people in the late 80s and early 90s in an attempt to sway them. I mean, that was a bad political move on his point, just like it was a bad move for him and Karl Hess to have approached the left. I mean, there's nothing wrong with approaching them, but pandering is a mistake. It's kind of like the people who say, who want Ron Paul to win, and so they just try and convince a liberal to vote for him because he's anti-war. And well, maybe there's nothing wrong with that per se. That liberal is not going to become a free market libertarian at all because they did that. And the real power in you know, the dialogue about Ron Paul is his libertarian ideals and getting people to think that way, not getting them just to vote. And I'd say he knows that probably more than anyone. I think that's actually his plan that he may well have came up with Murray Rothbard. But there's that. Now the other thing, there's a couple things that you said both in the comments and in your video that really did worry me. One was you expressed a lot of surprise that I would, in my video I had said something like, I don't have a problem if someone wants to write an anti-gay, homophobic novel about a gay person who, you know, lives a horrible life and dies, and it scares people from being homosexual. And I said, I don't mind if somebody does that. And you were rather taken aback by that. You were surprised and assumed that I think you actually thought that I was socially conservative. No, I'm agnostic. I'm gay. And although maybe I work all the time and I don't smoke weed and all that, but I guess I can come across as right-wing, but I'm not. And I'm not socially conservative, obviously. I'm not against drug use or anything. Just I don't do it. But you seemed kind of upset about that and really surprised. That's also how I learned that you know, you don't watch my channel very much, because you said, well, I don't watch it very much. Someone had pointed out in the comments that I was actually gay. And then the other thing, I don't know if you said in the comments or in the video, you said, you know, you're not going to attack hierarchy with violence, which kudos to you for saying that. But if there was a company that had hierarchy that you didn't like, and it sounded to me like anything that didn't have some kind of worker co-op where they're all co-equal or whatever, that you would boycott them. Now, of course, you have every right to boycott anybody for any reason. You can just say you don't like the way they look or something like that, and that's fine. But it's a little unnerving to me that you would feel that way, because really, I don't know what it is with left libertarians and actually a lot of socialists. You know, they have this thing where they think it's so cool to have like worker-owned factories or whatever. And there's, again, they have every right to do that. I don't. And if they want to start a factory like that, they can. And in my opinion of it is, I'm not going to boycott them. If they produce a product that I want, I will be happy to patronize them. But historically, they don't work that well. It doesn't happen very often. And even if we had a free market, just my guess is that they would be a great minority of the marketplace in any given industry. And yet you are so leery of hierarchy that you would boycott businesses that didn't exist like that. And that's a little worrying to me. Not because there's anything wrong per se with boycotting, but that you would put such a high emphasis on the organization that other people have. You know, that it bothers you the way other people order their life. And this comes back into, you talk about, you know, again, why I would be so okay with someone writing a homophobic novel. Well, because they have a right to write whatever they want, and it's none of my business. If I don't want to buy the novel, I won't buy it. And I don't fret over what other people think all the time, at least so long as they're not going to, so long as their ideology isn't going to aggress against me. So I don't care if somebody thinks that I'm going to go to hell because I'm gay. That doesn't bother me. Now, if they think that the state should arrest me and throw me in prison because I'm gay, well, that's different. But that's not homophobia and racism. And I don't know if it was you or somebody else, either in the comments of my video or in your video, said, what about that I'm underestimating racism is a problem? No, like heart disease is a real problem and smoking and all that, but racism's not a big deal anymore. In fact, even if we looked at like the height of racism, the maximum number of lynchings, it wouldn't have been a big deal relative to, say, like I mentioned, heart disease. And people want to be racist and they want to exclude, which by the way is not going to happen, but except in very, very unusual circumstances. So what? I mean, it's not a big deal. And this is what kind of bothers me. You say you believe in the non-aggression principle, and I guess you're sincere about that, but all this strong emphasis on what other people think and criticizing things that they think even when they don't directly affect you, at least in a coercive way, unless you're going to say that somebody not giving you a job is coercion. You know, unless you're going to take the positive rights view that if people don't give you things, then they are hurting you, which is... You didn't say that, so I'm not going to ascribe that to you, but let me just say that bothers me, because that's on the basis of aggression. You could say I'm not being aggressive because since he's racist and didn't give me a job, he's aggressing against me, so I'm defensively taking over his means of production. Now, you didn't actually say that, but if you care that much about what other people think, that it's something for you to crusade against and to boycott if they, don't meet your standards, then maybe you wouldn't. But I think that's a pretty dangerous ideology to be parroting. Then the whole caring what other people think, it really strikes me as puritanical and kind of a, we're going to save you from yourself. We're going to save you from being racist. We're going to save you from being homophobic or religious or whatever. And I just think it's kind of immature. You just have to let people be if they're not hurting you. And again, not giving you a job because they're homophobic is not hurting you. It's just refusing to serve you, which is fine. No one's my slave. I'm not entitled to their service. And there's the whole movement of caring that much about what other people think is a bad movement. It's borne very, very bitter fruit. That's where prohibition comes from. That's where, collectivism in all of its evil forms has its roots there. Not to say that everything that calls itself collectivist is necessarily like that, but just the idea that it's not good enough for people to live in peace. They have to think the right things. And if you say, well, I'm not going to violate the NAP, fine. But like I said, it starts to get to a fine line that if you're so anti, say, hierarchy, if you I can just imagine getting so angry at a company because they have an explicit hierarchy that you just think is so evil, even though the people there are free to leave and they don't. That you could say they are aggressing because they're not treating their workers the way I think they should or whatever, and they're I mean, you're going to boycott them because they don't have the hierarchy is something that you don't like. I guess it's a little vague on how much hierarchy. I'd say as long as there's no coercion, I don't see what the problem is with hierarchy, and it's kind of arbitrary to say this or that's too much. And the other thing is there's so much egalitarianism in the rhetoric here. It's similar to caring so much about what other people think. It's a very puritanical, very intrusive, anti-freedom of conscience, freedom of movement kind of thing, and then all the egalitarianism. I'm not an egalitarian. I think egalitarianism is stupid. Like, no one's equal. We're all different in every physical way we can measure and qualify and quantify, and so why then we all would have to in a factory we ought to all be equal partners? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and so much evil comes from that and from the puritanical view that why would you want to associate? I mean, to me, you have to not understand how bad those philosophies are, both in practice and in theory, to even bother wanting to associate with them at all, and to define yourself in that way. Now, it's great that you believe in what you understand to be free markets, and I think your understanding of them is, basically correct. I don't think that I don't think we're talking about different things when we say it, but then it really does make me uncomfortable, not to the point that I would boycott them, but that you would boycott somebody who has hierarchy, or you care if someone's racist. Look, just leave them alone. Just disassociate with them. The other thing here is kind of, we got to all be one brotherhood of man kind of bullshit. Like, there's got to be some kind of solidarity or whatever. Like, there doesn't have to be. I don't have to love all my neighbors, but I don't even know who most of them are. And that's not saying I'm antisocial. It's saying I don't have the ability to know that many people, let alone care what they do in the bedroom or in their businesses. And for you to care that much that you think it's wrong if they have racism, which I think everybody does to some degree. Even the people who are overtly trying to exercise that from them, I think they would even admit, if they're in any way intellectually honest, that it still happens. The other thing is, who do you associate with if you're going to be anti-racist? Who are the most anti-racist organizations, out there? That'd be like the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the ADL of B'nai B'rith, and they're both terrible organizations who slander everybody who's against the government as being racist. And yet those are the premier anti-racist organizations. And the crusade against racism is just really a crusade against individuals who don't like the government at this point. It's a smear. It's not a real thing. Now, you probably don't like the SPLC or the ADL of B'nai B'rith, but you are, if you're going around talking about how bad racism is, and exaggerating that, by the way, then you are empowering them, perhaps on accident, but that's what you're doing. And if you really believe that it's that big of a problem that you're willing to contribute to their power, okay, but I don't see that as something that's so necessary. The way you would the real way you combat racism is by, like I said, writing a novel about it, or making a movie or a TV show that convinces people that racism is bad. That's how you do it. You don't, just like if you don't like homosexuality, or you do like homosexuality, you do it by persuading people through media. That's how you do it. You don't boycott them or launch a crusade against it. It just smacks of abuse. And it's very, very off-putting to me that, I mean, I feel like you and I could be sitting around a campfire in my yard or something, and I could say something like, well, my one neighbor doesn't like black people very much. And then what? You'd want to go bang on their door and confront them about it, or ask me where they work so you could never go there again. Of course, you don't have to. I mean, you could do that, but where does all that lead? I see that as a place that's going to have to start violating the NAP at some point for no reason. Or, yeah, and the whole factory thing, it's just that, I don't know what the pet peeve, there's no evidence that that kind of stuff really works or will ever predominate, and yet for some reason that's idealized. Why? The only way that makes any sense is if you believe in egalitarianism, and that's just stupid. No, like, egalitarianism is retarded. And this anti-hierarchy stuff, you can say, oh, the state has hierarchy, and that's true, it does. It has a lot of things in it, but that doesn't mean everything about it. I mean, actually, states are ostensibly egalitarian. You know, would you say, well, then egalitarianism is wrong because the states ostensibly believe in egalitarianism? I mean, no, I would reject egalitarianism on other grounds. And hierarchy, I mean, as long as you're not coercing, I think I use the example of, say we have a family and they have they're a paternalistic family, and the father is, you know, in charge, and the woman is submissive to him, and the children are submissive to him. If you're a feminist or whatever, you might not like it, and if you're an egalitarian, you might think that there's hierarchy there that you don't like. But I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, it's fine. Now, if the daughter or the mother says, I hate this and I'm going to leave, and the father, you know, whips them and locks them in the basement, no, then that's not fine. Then he's a criminal then. But if he's just sitting there at the dinner table exercising authority and they respond, then, I mean, that's it. There's nothing to condemn there. There's nothing to get indignant about. And if you don't like it, then that's fine. Then don't be friends with that family. And if you really don't like it, then don't shop at the place that he does work. But to say there's something inherently wrong because there's some level of hierarchy that you don't like, I think you have to admit there's going to be some hierarchy no matter where you go. I mean, left libertarians are not all created equal. Some of you carry more weight than others. People were citing in your comments and in my comments, you know, this or that author to the exclusion of others. So, I mean, I'm assuming that you would value their opinion more than some random person's. So I just don't see why libertarians who are so much for individual liberty and all that, that's what libertarianism means to me, to most people who are familiar with the term. If you look in the definition, why we would want to start emphasizing, you know, universal brotherhood and collectivism and egalitarianism and anti-racism and anti-homophobia. And no, man, you just got to let people be. And if you really, it's fine if you want to crusade against it, I guess, but I don't want it to be defined by that crusade. I don't want to have that be a central tenet in my ideology, because it's not. What other people think is not my concern, unless they're actually, that ideology is going to actually hurt me, not just deny me something that I wouldn't otherwise have. So if someone's homophobic and they don't want to serve me, then that's fine, and I'm not gonna, you know, raise a big ruckus about it. And if someone's racist and doesn't want to serve, again, this seems very, very rare nowadays, but, you know, if we want to still pretend that it's a huge problem, and maybe I'm going to get flack for saying that it's just pretend, but like I said, how many people die of heart disease every year? How many people are being killed in the wars, the drug war especially, which I'm sure we all agree on that, but, you know, the actual racism, I mean, how much does it hurt if a white woman sees a black guy walking down her street and she kind of cringes a little bit and she's a little scared of him? How much does that hurt him? I mean, because that's almost all the racism you're going to see is people who get uncomfortable around black people or Mexicans or whatever. That's going to be almost all the racism. It's not going to. When was the last time there ever was a lynching? Not that that wouldn't be a horrible crime when it does happen. It's very, very rare. And how, you know, this uncomfortableness that some people are going to have around certain races, that doesn't, I don't see how you can even quantify that as a big problem. I just don't, you know. Or maybe that they get upset if their daughter dates a black guy. Oh well, they might get upset because their daughter dates a guy who works at Burger King too, and that doesn't mean that, you know, there's a huge class problem in the United States. So I think we agree on a lot. I think we know that we agree on a lot. And you said I wasn't strawmanning your position. Yeah, and I don't think you were strawmanning mine either. But there's a difference in emphasis that is very disconcerting to me. All this emphasis on egalitarianism and anti-racism and anti-hierarchy and boycotting businesses don't have. I mean, again, you have a right to do that, so fine. But why all the emphasis? You know, it'd be like if I said I'm not racist and I'm not against black people, then black people should be able to go to business and have businesses, but I'm not ever going to shop at a black business and I'm going to boycott black businesses. Would you say, oh yeah, that's fine? Or would you say there's something a little, I mean, he's not going to put them out of business, but he's going to boycott them? That kind of is disconcerting, right? It would be to you, right? And when I hear that you're going to boycott regular businesses that have, I mean, because that's what you're talking about. Because how many businesses do you know are organized the way that you find most appropriate, and why? And then, what, isn't it a little bit conceited to say that businesses should be organized the way you like and not another way? Just like people should think what you think they should be, is whatever, multicultural or anti-racist or anti-homophobic as you. Otherwise, we've got a problem. But how you're gonna, I mean, if we have if that's a problem, I'd love to hear you how you're gonna solve that and not verge into violating the NAP. And maybe you never would, but if we had millions and millions of left libertarianism who are going to preach about how evil it is, I just don't see it as working. So I guess it's more than semantic. It's just, why are we emphasizing those things? Of all the problems in the world, from a libertarian point of view, those are not big problems, and you don't approach them. Your approach to them is so heavy-handed as to be kind of worrying to me. So anyway, you complained that your video was too long. Here, I've tripled the length. Maybe that's why you never watch my videos, because they do tend to be long. I like to talk. I don't deny it. So if you did actually get to the end, kudos to you, and that's it.